struggles and not having space to be vulnerable to express their fear and emotion and their needs. And so I really want you to, Antoine, to really, for those tuning in, really begin to impact how serious that is as far as with Black men having those struggles and not having room to express them.
Yes, I think that that is such a very serious issue, and I think that one of the things that we have to look at when we think about suicidality and what that has always meant to the Black community, we always saw it as a problem that other communities had. We never saw it as a problem that we had. We always thought, oh well, other races do that, but Black people don't do that. And now we're seeing, I mean, I would hate to call it a trend, but adolescence, I believe it's either the number one or number two cause of death is death by suicide. That's crazy. Our young people are just making determinations that it's just easier to not be here than to deal with all of the stuff that they have to deal with in life.
Mhm.
And I think that particularly with Black men, and I say this all the time, but I think it's worth always rehashing and it's worth saying over and over because I feel like that is what will normalize the feeling that can sometimes feel a little bit taboo. Is that there is a lot of social pressure that Black men feel when we navigate society. And a lot of that pressure is not something that we ask for, it's not something that we volunteer for, but it's pressure that is socially assigned to us. And we feel like we have to live up to that pressure. We feel like we have to always have the right answers. You know, we have to always have the right amount of resources. And sometimes when we don't have those things, we just kind of fold under the pressure, and that can look different ways. You know, that can look like serious mental health issues, that can look like homelessness, job insecurity. All of these things that plague our community can really start from somebody just not having that person or village that can really support them when they're going through a difficult time.
Mhm. One of the things I saw, it was actually Prophetess Barbara Calloway. She posted last week on her Instagram, which I didn't know was a thing, adolescents selecting a date, and they would post it on social media saying, "I picked a date."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't know what it meant until I read her caption, her copy, and I said, "They're really doing this?" And so, like you said, I don't even understand why that's training with young people, but I wonder how that's even impacting our young Black boys between, like, prepubescent up until early 20s, and just the different stages of what that may look like and things we don't recognize in our Black boys if they're a teenager, then maybe early 20s, 30s, like, for each decade of that age group, and understanding really where does that pressure begin? Does it start when they're 13, 15 with this expectation to perform or be an athlete? Or is it in college? You know, when we see a decline in Black men graduating from college now, but there's always like different earmarks with each demographic where it seems like these pinpoints with Black men and mental health are not being addressed and it's just are not even talked about.
Yeah, I think it would even start earlier than that in terms of just the social pressure. So I know growing up, this whole idea around expressing emotion was just not something that was encouraged. So if
Mhm.
I was sad, the perception was always to toughen up. Don't cry, be a man about it. And these are things that we grew up hearing these things, and now as an adult we may not think much about it, but what does that do to a kid? What does that teach that kid that's
Mhm.
constantly told that anytime that they express emotion they're soft or they're not being a man or they need to toughen up? Or in a lot of times in a single parent household, especially if it's a woman headed single parent household, there may be this perception that you now have to be the man of the house, but you're like 8 or 9. And that's not necessarily a role that you
Yeah.
ask for, a role that you volunteered for, a role that you may even be ready for. And, we say a lot of these things, and we may say them kind of off the cuff as like, well, I don't literally mean the man of the house. But we manifest a lot of these things, and
Yeah,
then those things become identities within us. And we carry that into our adulthood, and we carry that into our relationships that we have as an adult.
that's true. And by you saying that made me think of the word adultification and how within our community we're so quick to adult our children so soon, especially with
Mhm.
boys, little man, you're the man of the house now, or even from a toxic standpoint to where the single mom kind of treats the son like it's her man.
Yeah.
And it can cause problems in relationships when he begins to date or even get married. And
Hmm.
so, can you kind of unpack how dangerous that is? I understand you want your son to be responsible, but there's that gray area to where you're crossing the line where you now adultified, and maybe even there's um his role kind of gets misconstrued here.
I think it can be very dangerous only because kids have different stages of development that they're supposed to go through.
Mhm,
And when you kind of skip a stage before that kid is really ready, then they lose all of the skills that they otherwise would have gained. So before they're the man of the house, they need to learn things like self-esteem
mhm,
and confidence and self-control and anger management. All of those are skills that we start teaching toddlers. We teach toddlers, don't hit somebody, don't violate people's space. This is good touch, bad touch. Calm down. We teach toddlers that, and throughout childhood, we reinforce some of those same elements. You're beautiful, you're handsome. That's building up self-esteem,
mhm,
self-confidence. But when you don't take the time to really cultivate that, and when you just skip to, okay, now you're the man of the house, like all of those other skills that I otherwise would be teaching you, I'm going to skip to you being a man of the house, then you don't have those skills. So you grow up and you're a man, and on the outside, it looks very polished aesthetically. You may have it all going on, but on the inside, you have no confidence, or you may not have any self esteem or no self control because you weren't really given an opportunity in childhood to really cultivate and practice those skills. So
mhm.
that's the other thing, is that skills have to be practiced.